In 1906, a man called Humphrey Milford, who was a representative of the delegates of OUP, he wrote to the Fowler brothers. They're already OUP authors. They're most sort of famous for the style guide that they wrote, Guide to Usage and English and Grammar. And he wrote to them asking if they would be interested in compiling a smaller dictionary. By this stage, the OED was in full swing, but it hadn't yet got to the end. And I think the intention was always that that would be a really good basis for subsequent books. But obviously they thought, we'd like to get on with this now. And in 1906, that was when its publication began, or compilation began. And then 5 years later, it was born. So the first edition came out in 1911, and this is it. It was very well received at the time. I think it was described as being literally without rival and a great triumph. And it must have been quite revolutionary, because previously there hadn't really been a dictionary which was reflecting the words that were being spoken, a dictionary of current English. It's not a historical dictionary, it's not charting the development in the language. Instead, it's reflecting the language of the world and of the people in the world who use it. What's particularly fascinating, I think, about the Concise is that it may not be a historical dictionary in the sense that we're looking at one word, what that meant when it came into the language and whether it's changed its meaning. But what it does do is gives you a great insight into the world and how the world has changed. So words which were new in 1914, flapper was one example, which went in then. You can see obviously what the worldview was at the time, what was concerning people, through to the next edition when the First World War had happened, and you're getting words like trench coat, trench foot, words to do with the films, movies, because that's what had then happened. Because initially, of course, television and radio, they didn't really exist at this time, but you can see through the subsequent editions what was becoming more popular and much more common. So it's a real insight into the world as it was through the century. There was a real desire to increase the coverage of international English, world English if you like, so that in 1931, for example, which was when the third edition came out, some Indian English words were introduced to the dictionary for the first time, chapati being one example. Spelled slightly differently, but it's nonetheless the same word. And I think that probably was the start of that increase in coverage, which has carried on and, grown in force from then on until now. The Concise isn't just a smaller dictionary, it's also got a different ethos. The definitions are clear and concise and also have to be informative, and it prioritises usage over history. So what we want to do is take the reader exactly to the definition of the word as it's used now, first and foremost. And now we have the 12th edition of the dictionary. As you can see, it looks quite different. It's bigger, taller, it's got more words, more pages, but it's quite a nice comparison, really.